The lady from the Scottish village of Blackburn, Susan Boyle, came into our lives as if from a real-life fairy tale. She went through years of suffering due to being misdiagnosed with health conditions and bullied as a youngster. But then, in 2009, her voice debuted on Britain's Got Talent, and everyone was amazed. It was like magic. Susan won over millions of fans and broke sales records with her first album, which topped the charts in the United Kingdom and the United States and became Amazon's most pre-ordered album of all time. Susan became a living embodiment of faith and optimism as a result of her remarkable perseverance and her triumph. Her inspiring journey exemplifies the power of faith and determination in the face of adversity, showing that everyone can create their own fairy tale if they put their hearts into it. From modest origins to surprising success, Susan Boyle, one of the most remarkable voices of our time, overcame obstacles throughout her infancy. Despite being born in Blackburn, Scotland in 1961, Susan had a tough childhood. She had a tough time right from the start. Brain impairment caused by an oxygen deprivation after birth was a diagnosis that impacted Susan's life from the very beginning. Living in Blackburn was difficult for the Boyle family, who were not wealthy. A little house in an industrial neighborhood was home to the Boyle family. Patrick and Bridget, her parents, battled valiantly to bring up their 10 children despite the overwhelming odds. Bridget, a gifted pianist and shorthand typist, worked tirelessly to support her family while Patrick, a veteran of World War II, toiled in a mining plant. Susan had a lot on her plate with her big family and their poor financial circumstances. The trauma of bullying and abuse that Susan endured as a youngster haunts her to this day. Bullies found her easy prey because of the cognitive and physical impairments brought on by her brain damage. Susan endured the scorn and physical violence of her classmates, in addition to the insensitivity and harshness of a few educators throughout her time at school. She was already socially isolated and traumatized by her frequent excruciating convulsions, which were misdiagnosed as ADHD and epilepsy. Unfortunately, Susan's academic life was severely affected by her regular seizures, which led to a lack of understanding and treatment from her peers. Some of her educators, who failed to recognize the severity of her illness, resorted to harsh punishments, including the use of belts, if she failed to pay attention in class or displayed strange behavior. Little Susan's spirit was profoundly wounded by everything that she went through. Even at home, Susan had difficulties that did not stop at the school gates. Patrick was a decent and hard-working guy, but he had a short fuse and would lash out at Susan whenever he was angry. She felt unsafe and alone in her own house as a result of her father's mental and physical violence. Despite her love and concern, Susan's mother, Bridget, unintentionally made things worse for Susan. Bridget was overprotective because she was worried about Susan's health, which hindered Susan's growth in self-reliance and resilience. Despite its loving intentions, this shield made it difficult for Susan to develop into an independent young woman. At the age of 25, Susan had a boyfriend, and the memory of that time is one of her most traumatic ones. This guy, John, was a transient romantic interest of Susan's, but Susan's parents, particularly her father, were against the relationship because they thought she lacked maturity and independence to make her own choices. Her parents' meddling ended the romance, and Susan felt stifled by their dominance once again. In spite of all these obstacles, how did Susan Boyle achieve superstardom on a worldwide scale? As we explore her moving narrative further, we invite you to join us. Susan Boyle's parents kindled a fire in their daughter's heart for music when she was very little. Bridget had exquisite piano skills, and Patrick performed at neighborhood clubs. She was profoundly affected by both. Music filled their little Blackburn house, providing Susan with a temporary refuge from the hardships of her existence. Susan found meaning and happiness in her singing, which flourished in this setting. Susan had a crystal-clear goal in mind, but getting there was no picnic. She had an exceptional skill, but getting her name out there was no picnic. Susan had several rejections before to her transformational audition for Britain's Got Talent. She entered several contests and events in the vain hope of landing a big break. on top of the constant barrage of criticism and miscommunication she had endured throughout her life. These rejections were devastating on a more intimate level. Susan tried out for Michael Barrymore's 1995 TV program, My Kind of People. She sang a rendition of the song, I Don't Know How to Love Him, by Jesus Christ Superstar. Susan encountered ridicule rather than support and approval. She looked unpolished, and the crowd and Barrymore both laughed at her because of that, not because of her singing ability. It would have been easy for Susan to let this traumatic event break her spirit, but she kept her resolve. Susan kept saving enough for the recording of demo cassettes over the next many years as she persisted in following her ambition. Using her life savings, she recorded 3 demos at a nearby studio in 1998, Killing Me Softly, Cry Me a River, and Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. She then submitted these cassettes to different record companies, TV programs, and radio stations in the hopes that someone would hear them. Success evaded her and rejections kept piling up, no matter how hard she tried. Susan persevered because she had unfaltering faith in herself and because her mother always pushed her. Over and over again, Bridget encouraged her daughter to follow her passions because she knew she had great potential. In 2009, Susan made the life-altering choice to audition for Britain's Got Talent, inspired by Bridget's faith and encouraging words. British talent show Britain's Got Talent welcomed Susan onto the platform on April 11, 2009. It was hard to see a 47-year-old with her humble looks and manner as a Hollywood celebrity. Susan presented herself to the judges and the skeptical audience and shared her dream of following in Elaine Paige's footsteps as a professional singer. Smirks and raised eyebrows greeted her arrival, a reflection of the judges' and audience's lack of anticipation. Next, Susan broke into Les Miserables' I Dreamed a Dream song. Her voice was so expressive and commanding that it froze the room at first note. A sense of wonder and respect replaced the doubt. Simon Cowell, the notoriously critical judge, seemed shocked. The performance was the greatest wake-up call ever, according to another judge, Amanda Holden. Standing ovation and acclaim ensued as the audience's first impression was utterly disproved. YouTube users went crazy about Susan's audition video, which quickly gained millions of views. People all across the globe responded to her performance, and she became famous overnight. Her voice was so majestic, but her look was so unassuming that she moved many people. The narrative of her triumph against hardship to display her ability resonated with people all across the world. The unexpected prominence, nevertheless, was accompanied with tremendous strain. The world suddenly turned its attention to Susan, who had hitherto led a private existence. The level of public interest and media attention was tremendous. Susan had a difficult time making the leap from obscurity to fame. The pressures of fame and the expectations others had of her were too much for her to handle. After Britain's Got Talent came to a close, Susan Boyle began a new chapter in her life, one that would be full of incredible triumphs and formidable obstacles. Rapid success came with tremendous strain, however. Upon its November 2009 release, her first album, I Dreamed a Dream, hit incredible milestones right away. In its first week of release in the UK, the album sold more copies than any other debut album in history. It also topped the charts in more than 21 countries. I Dreamed a Dream solidified Susan's position as a worldwide musical sensation and earned her almost $5 million in only a few months, thanks to its sales of over 9 million copies worldwide. Unprecedented strain and stress came with Susan's unexpected stardom. She was suddenly thrust into the spotlight after leading a life of relative seclusion. For Susan, the demands of fame, together with those of her admirers and the press, were too much to bear. She went to the hospital after Britain's Got Talent because she was so exhausted and stressed out. She had to take a long hiatus to recuperate from the mental toll that fame and a busy schedule had on her. Problems affected her family life as much as her mental health. Susan and her brother Gary's relationship hit a rough patch due to money problems. A huge quantity of money was given to Gary by Susan, who wanted to assist and was compassionate so that he might preserve his failing firm. To be more precise, she saved Gary's company from insolvency by lending him £75,000. Unfortunately, this caused a lot of miscommunication and fighting among the family. Even more stressful for Susan was Gary's accusation that she was not offering sufficient assistance. Disagreements about money strained family ties and contributed to an already tense and misunderstood environment. Susan had to deal with terrifying occurrences that endangered her safety on top of family disputes. Numerous times, unidentified individuals broke into her Blackburn house. Susan came home after a night out in 2010 to see an adolescent positioned on the stairs of her house. Luckily, nobody took anything, but she was still quite worried and concerned after what happened. In 2011, another disturbing incident occurred when a devoted fan tried to enter her Liverpool hotel room while she was performing. This admirer made Susan feel frightened and insecure as she nervously awaited her arrival in her hotel room. She felt even more exposed and threatened in her own home as a result of these events, which increased her anxiety levels. Both Susan Boyle's personal tenacity and the many honors she has received during her career have contributed to her meteoric rise to fame. She has made an impact with her amazing skill, which has been acknowledged internationally. Winning many World Music Awards, which honor the best-selling music artists from each major region worldwide, was a great accomplishment for Susan. With record-breaking sales and Grammy Award nominations for her first album, I Dreamed a Dream, she proved she belonged at the pinnacle of the music business. Along with these honors, Susan was also presented with many Billboard Music Awards, which recognize the most accomplished musicians in the United States for the year. Guinness World Records recognized her as the oldest artist to achieve #1 with a debut album and the fastest-selling female debut album in the UK, further attesting to her immense popularity. Susan's impact extended beyond the United States. She received ARIA Music Awards in recognition of her success in the Australian market. The Scottish Music Awards recognized her for her achievements to music and culture in Scotland, a place where she was born and raised. In 2012, Susan was made an Officer of the Order of the British Empire, OBE, for her contributions to music and philanthropy, which is considered one of the highest distinctions she has received. Her notable charitable and artistic accomplishments are highlighted by this honor bestowed to her by the British Crown. With over 25 million copies sold globally, Susan Boyle has accumulated over 120 albums with platinum and gold certifications. Her rise to fame is a tribute to her extraordinary skill and determination, and her narrative of coming from nothing as a singer is an inspiration to millions. She has been profoundly impacted by the regrets and loss of loved ones, even if she has accomplished great things professionally. In 2007, Susan Boyle's mother, Bridget Boyle, passed away. Not only was her mom her best friend, but she was also her biggest cheerleader. By consistently affirming Susan's abilities and urging her to keep going, Bridget helped Susan follow her heart in her pursuit of music. Not only did Susan lose a parent with her mother's death, but she also lost her best friend. A huge hole opened up in Susan's life after her mother passed away. She felt that a piece of herself was missing throughout her protracted time of sadness and isolation. Bertie McCaw's death from cancer in 2015 was another devastating loss for Susan. Throughout Susan's life and career, Bertie was there for her as a sister and a loyal friend. Susan felt the anguish of loss all over again with the shocking news of Bertie's death. As a result of losing loved ones, Susan's mental health took a serious hit. She often felt lonely and empty due to the persistent specters of her mother and sister, whom she loved dearly. Both Susan's mental health and her personal life were profoundly affected by these tragedies. Susan has long lamented her infertility. She has mentioned this as one of her major regrets in several interviews. Susan is very lonely and unfulfilled, even though she has accomplished much in her professional life. She wishes she had children to share life's ups and downs with. To satisfy this want, she has also thought of adopting a kid. Susan has spoken about her love of children and her contemplation of adopting one. She hopes that by showering an unhappy kid with her love and care, she may offer them pleasure and joy. Her desire to become a mother is a reflection of her caring and loving personality, as is her desire to help others. The present circumstance keeps putting new hurdles in her path, and health is always a major concern. Susan had to make rapid and significant adjustments to her way of life after receiving the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes in 2012. A wake-up call, Susan's diagnosis made her face the facts about her health and the adjustments she would need to make to cope with the disease. Dietary modifications were among the most major adjustments Susan had to make. For as long as she could remember, sweets, and chocolate in particular, had brought her immense joy and solace. On the other hand, reducing sugar intake and opting for healthier food options were crucial to diabetes management. In response to this challenge, Susan drastically cut down on sugar and replaced it with a diet rich in fresh produce, lean meats, and other healthy foods. The importance of Susan's health motivated her to persevere through the challenges of this change. In addition to making modifications to her food, Susan made exercise a regular part of her day. Walking was one of her first exercises, and as her fitness level rose, she worked her way up to faster speeds and longer distances. Not only did these walks aid in her diabetes management, but they also gave her a psychological and emotional boost, which kept her optimistic and focused on her objectives. Later in adulthood, Susan learned she had diabetes and more devastating health news. For a long time, she had mistakenly believed that her brain impairment had been brought on by a lack of oxygen at her birth. She felt differently about herself and how other people regarded her because of this misdiagnosis. But a second opinion determined that she really suffered from Asperger syndrome, an ASD subtype. Susan felt a newfound feeling of comfort and clarity after receiving her diagnosis, which shed fresh light on her experiences and actions. After Susan learned she had Asperger syndrome, she was better able to handle social situations and her condition. People with Asperger's tend to have trouble interacting with others, exhibit repetitive activities, and have intense interests. An indication of how seriously Susan takes her singing profession is her unwavering commitment to it. Her life and sense of self-awareness were much enhanced by receiving the appropriate assistance and guidance after receiving the accurate diagnosis. After overcoming one major health obstacle after another, Susan had a small stroke in April 2022. Since her speech and movement were both impaired by the stroke, it was a major setback for her health and professional prospects. Strokes may cause a lot of problems, so it was a terrible event for Susan and her family. Susan continued to tackle her recuperation with the same doggedness that had defined her whole life, despite the seriousness of the situation. Recuperation was a painful ordeal. With the help of her physical and speech therapists, Susan fought tirelessly to restore her talents. She faced arduous treatment sessions every day in an effort to regain her strength and enhance the clarity of her voice. It was a laborious procedure that demanded a great deal of patience and persistence. With the help of her loved ones and admirers, Susan drew on her inner strength and persevered. Amazing strides in Susan's rehabilitation have been achieved by the year 2023. An enormous driving force was her will to get back on stage. After her meteoric rise to fame on Britain's Got Talent, she resolved to return to the program and perform one more. Her determination and success in the face of hardship were embodied in her objective. Susan made her triumphant comeback to Britain's Got Talent in June 2023, wowing both the judges and the crowd with her mesmerizing performance. As Susan sang the original world-famous hit I Dreamed a Dream, her voice took on a new intensity, mirroring the trials and triumphs she had overcome. The audience's reaction was absolutely electric, with enthusiastic clapping and standing ovations. Her triumphant comeback was a tribute to her resilience in the face of adversity, as much as it was to her singing abilities. The story of Susan Boyle's journey is one of remarkable perseverance and resolve. Susan has shown that genuine skill and determination can conquer any challenge, rising from her modest origins in Blackburn, Scotland, to the international arena. That we can persevere through adversity and realize our ambitions is a lesson we may take away from her tale. While pursuing a career in music, Susan encountered several rejections, misunderstandings, and acts of bullying. Diabetes and a neurological disorder that was undiagnosed were two of her major health issues. The love and encouragement of her family and her dedication to her music enabled Susan to persevere through these obstacles. As she triumphed on Britain's Got Talent, she became an inspiration to many who have been told they can't do what they want in life. Take heart, follow your dreams, and keep going. That is Susan's message. Her strength and determination in the face of hardship should motivate us to value what makes us special, pursue our passions, and keep believing in the future even when it seems bleakest. Her story echoes the words of Walt Whitman, who famously said, "Keep your face always toward the sunshine and shadows will fall behind you." Whoever needs a reminder of the value of perseverance and pursuing one's dreams will benefit from hearing Susan's tale. Anyone interested in continuing the discussion on Susan's trip may do so by leaving a comment below. To ensure that you do not miss any more enthralling and enigmatic tales involving your favorite celebs, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We appreciate you taking the time to see our video. In our next video, we will see you soon.